It is the housewife who is responsible for the happiness of the family. Her work is today harder than ever before, but also today there is no task that is more fulfilling for a woman than to be the lady of the house. The Encyclopedia of the household aims to assist her in doing so as a loyal assistant. All the advice and information that the lady of the house might need, she can find here. End of quote. Providing the relocated German Jewish homemaker with all the advice she might need, with a more than ambitious aim of this encyclopedia, given the tremendous changes the immigrants had to face in Palestine. As a result of the rise of National Socialism, some 50,000 German Jews fled Germany to Palestine in the 1930s. As they were coming from one of the most modern countries in the world, it was quite a shock for them to arrive in Palestine, where they had to deal with the Middle Eastern climate, an underdeveloped economy, the Hebrew language, and several others. Matters were complicated further by the fact that the new immigrants constituted the most bourgeois immigration wave that entered Palestine by then. They mainly belonged to the urban, educated middle class, were assimilated to German culture, and they weren't Zionists. These features weren't welcomed by the Jewish community in Palestine, the Yishuv, and I will use this term from now on, which suspected the newcomers of harming their socialist achievements. Even though perceived as a capitalist immigration wave by the Yishuv society, most of the immigrants experienced a severe social decline in Palestine. And this affected the homemakers among them in a special way. Firstly, they had to adjust homemaking to the difficult conditions in Palestine, like unknown food, backward technical equipment, crowded housing, for example. Secondly, they had to perform these tasks on their own, without household aids that were quite common in the middle-class families in Germany. Many women literally didn't know how to cook or clean when they arrived in Palestine. And thirdly, as many men became unemployed, homemakers took up employment in addition to homemaking. Because of the challenging situation, there was a strong need for orientation among the housewives, and therefore guidebooks customized for German-speaking homemakers became an important tool. What I want to do this afternoon is to elaborate on the kind of knowledge that these guidebooks transferred. What norms were homemakers confronted with in Palestine, and how were these norms gendered? How was the social change addressed in these books, or maybe not addressed? And I will attend to these questions by looking at the two main publications written for German Jewish homemakers in Palestine, two guidebooks that follow very different orientations. One is the Zionist approach, and the other is rather a commercial approach. And this is the first one. Erna Meyer's How to Cook in Palestine was published in 1936 in Tel Aviv on behalf of the Women's International Zionist Organization in German, Hebrew, and English. Its author, Erna Meyer, was a well-known expert on domestic economy and the rationalization of the home work in Germany before she immigrated to Palestine in 1933. Her cooking book was obtainable in bookstores and grocery shops. It includes, this is a table of contents, I'm not sure you can actually figure out just for getting the idea. It includes recipes, instructions for the use of cooking equipment, as well as general articles on cooking and health. Even though published in 3 languages, it was mainly targeting the immigrants from Germany. Its ideological premise is expressed in its introduction. I quote, "The time has come that we housewives must take an attempt with more energy than before to free our kitchen from its galut traditions. We should wholeheartedly adjust ourselves to healthy Palestinian cooking." End of quote. Galut is the Hebrew negative term for diaspora. Meyer's claim is in line with the Zionist absorption policy, adapting to Palestine by giving up the diaspora attitude, meaning the bourgeois way of living, working, and cooking, as we see here. The housewives are constructed as one group with one kitchen and one goal, freeing the kitchen from obsolete customs and adjusting to healthy Palestine cooking. Only then would they be able to become entrenched in their new homeland, Palestine. Here, the newly immigrated homemakers are allotted a seemingly important role in the nation-building project through politicizing the very private practices of consuming and cooking. While Meyer is monopolizing them for Zionist ideology, she also unifies them as one group that is supposed to collectively fulfill the task of transition and hence, at least seemingly, overcomes the isolation of each housewife. Meyer is prompting her readers to acquaint themselves with healthy Palestine cooking. Here you see an example. This is okra, bamia. This should be adjusted not only to the climate, but most importantly, should it include only local products produced by Jewish agriculture in Palestine. According to Meyer, the use of local products was not only an obligation in order to support the national economy, but also due to its superiority in terms of health. Health and Zionism seem to be equivalents. Butter, for example, an important ingredient in German cooking, but at that time only available as an import from foreign countries, is disqualified by Meyer, while the advantages of olive oil are celebrated at length. Another important element on Meyer's agenda is rationalization. Both in text and illustrations, as you can see here, the housewife is urged to work as professionally and efficiently as possible. Anna Meyer was convinced that in Palestine, the rationalization of the housework was an even more needed approach than in Germany, as the homemakers were forced to work here under worse technical and climatic conditions. Throughout the book, Meyer is contrasting two kinds of housewives. The good housewife is thoughtful, rationalizing, a follower of healthy Palestine cooking, and an active Zionist. The bad housewife is thoughtless and indifferent to Zionism. And yet the latter, the bad housewife, is not excluded from the collective, but educated to improve herself and hence to become a worthy homemaker. The thoughtless homemaker, therefore, is not an identity, but a state that can be overcome through conscious efforts of both the Zionist institutions and the housewives. And I'm coming to the second book, the Encyclopedia of the Household in Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel is Hebrew for Land of Israel. The encyclopedia was published in German and Hebrew by the advertising company of the German entrepreneur Ludwig Goldschmidt, who came to Palestine in 1935. It was handed out for free in 4 volumes between 1939 and 1940 to customers of grocery stores, mainly in Tel Aviv. As opposed to Meyer, this was a company's commercial initiative and not the publication of a political institution of the Yishuv. The declared intention of the encyclopedia that we heard at the beginning of this presentation is to assist the women of the German immigration with homemaking in Palestine. Hundreds of entries from A to Z deal with subjects such as cooking, cleaning, beauty, health, education, marriage, and etiquette. The unclear and yet blatant intention of this book is the advertising of all kinds of Palestinian and non-Palestinian products. I'll show you an example of how it looked like. The text is composed of 3 elements: the entries themselves, the advertisements that are clearly marked as advertisements through design, and then there are advertisements within the entries. And those different entries don't necessarily correspond regarding their ideological positions. For example, one entry deals with olive oil and its advantages over butter, while another entry prices butter as one of the healthiest products available. A remarkable feature of the encyclopedia is the fact that despite its name, you see here again, despite its name, through large parts, nothing indicates that this knowledge is to be used in Palestine and not in Europe. Throughout the book, advice can be found regarding evening dresses, cocktails, food, and etiquette that probably express the memories and fantasies of the bourgeois life lived back in Germany better than the actual conditions in Palestine that were restricted by the proletarianization of the immigrants. On the one hand, this can be read as the unwillingness or the lack of necessity to deal with Palestine. As in Tel Aviv, the biggest German Jewish diaspora in the country, where the book was mainly distributed, the mass immigration of the German Jews originated its own subculture by 1939. Therefore, the use of local food might not have been deemed necessary by the encyclopedia. And on the other hand, this can be understood as the conservative desire of the immigrants after a traumatic immigration to a foreign country with a strict ideological demand to keep the home as the one place in which nothing has changed. Hence, and as against the demands of the Yishuv, the homemakers were encouraged to maintain the continuity of the German Jewish diaspora in Palestine. The noticeable amount of instructions for cleaning of all kinds of impurities throughout the book can be read not only as a virtual protection of the health and cleanliness as such, but also as a figurative attempt to keep the Levant out of the living room. In other words, the homemakers were entrusted with shielding the home, and thus their realm, from the negative features associated with Palestine, like chaos, dirt, and illnesses. Regardless of this rather conservative approach, the encyclopedia also includes entries that acknowledge and even encourage social change in the immigrant community, for example, the obtaining of driving licenses for women. To conclude, in the two guidebooks that I discussed today, homemaking is highly charged with meaning. In both cases, the instructions for the homemaker are engendered by the encounter with Palestine. Depending on the approval or rejection of Zionist ideology and its demands, contrary directives are constructed for homemaking. Erna Meyer's How to Cook in Palestine clearly reflects the Zionist ideology dominant in the issue of society and its rigid demands for adoption and absorption. She tries to convince the German Jewish homemakers to adapt to this Zionist form of homemaking by holding out the prospect to become fully integrated and valuable members of the Yishuv society. The kitchen at Erna Meyer's book is constructed as a place of change and new identity. While Meyer advertises new homemaking in the new country, the encyclopedia mainly represents notions that were brought from Germany to Palestine. It is not demanding any ideological contribution to the nation-building project, as it is indifferent towards Zionism, and addresses the homemakers mainly as consumers that can choose whatever pleases them from its offers. At the same time, it demands the homemakers to be responsible for the happiness of the family, like we heard at the beginning, and instructs them through its advice to conserve the lost world. The kitchen is constructed as a place of memory here. The two guidebooks reflect different norms for homemaking and the homemakers that were valid at the same time in different sectors of the Yishuv society in the 1930s and 40s. The contrary demands of the absorbing society on the one hand and the immigrating group on the other hand created a blatant tension and made the answer to the question how to cook in Palestine fraught with meaning. That was the question. Thank you very much for your attention.